So anyway, he threw an immaculate inning on Friday, which was really fun. No, you know what an immaculate inning is? 9 pitches, 9 strikes, all guys struck out. Yeah, so it's a really cool. There's only been 112 thrown in Major League history, so it's really rare. It's as rare as a no-hitter to throw an immaculate inning, but it's probably not that rare at high school because you'll get a pitcher who's just dominant and you'll get a bad high school team. Major League Baseball, it's a much more level playing field. High school baseball, you can play some really bad baseball teams. So, though really the last 12 games we've beaten, there's only been one team in there that I'd put in the category of being really, maybe 2, of being not as experienced, maybe not necessarily bad, but just not as experienced. The rest of them, like we beat Nolan Catholic on Thursday, beat Green Hill we no-hit Green Hill twice, and then we beat Bay Area Christian, who's won the state championship for Division III in TAPS the last 2 years, so they're good. And then we closed by beating Oak Ridge. Now, the game last night, though, Oak Ridge had run out of pitching. They were on their 6th game of the weekend, so they threw a position player at us. And so, anyway. But needless to say, I don't like staying up out and late on Saturday night. And so I don't like it because I preach on Sunday mornings. But anyway. And it was cold. It was cold last night. Yeah, I mean, in the afternoon it was okay, like while the sun was out and stuff. But man, when the sun went down, we got that 8 p.m. start last night. I was like, oh, I'm still cold. Do you know how it is? You get really cold, and then you wake up the next day, you're like, I think I'm still cold. I think, it's like the baked potato that didn't get cooked all the way through, I needed to go sit in a sauna for a few hours just to get all the way down and the core warmed up. So, yeah, it was cold out there. It was cold this morning. I was walking over. Someone's like, you don't have a jacket? I was like, it's March. I shouldn't have to have a jacket. But, yeah, it's cold out there. So, well, I hope you guys are doing well. Our household's busy, but Austin's back from D.C. from his trip, and I think all that went fine. And we're hoping, we still have a lot of work to do here, but we're hoping he graduates May 12. So the big issue here is his research class. He's got a research project he has to turn in. If he doesn't finish it, what they'll probably do is give him an incomplete and let him do it over the summer. Because it's not like a class. He just works independently. He has to turn in this project. And they don't fail you for that. I mean, unless you turn in a really bad project and don't fix it. But I think I'm hoping he'll graduate May 12, but we got to turn that project in. And so we'll see. But if he gets that done, he'll graduate May 12, so that's a lot of fun. And yeah. And what else is going on? You guys are well? That's my friend Andre in the back there. Andre is a student at DBU, but is also a graduate of Dallas Theological Seminary. And so he's gone back for additional education so that he can go to medical school. So, yeah. And so that's Andre. You get a chance to meet him. He's a very engaging individual. Love Andre. And I think you would enjoy getting to know him. It's a very interesting gentleman. So, yeah. Enjoyed conversations with him immensely. So he's always in the science department too, sitting at that table outside the chemistry lab. And I'm like, oh boy, the life of pre-med work. So anyway, all right. Well, it is good to see you all. I don't know what else is going on. We are making plans for our Mexico mission trip, so that's on. I know right now that's a little dicey because it seems like crossing the border can be. Yeah, it can be dangerous, yeah. But right now the plan is still to go, and yeah, so, but that's the last week of July. It's the plan, and we're going to teach the book of Hebrews. Reuben has entitled our grand conference, Hebrews, the book that Reuben is afraid of. That's the title of the conference. I told him a better title might be the book of Hebrews, The Supremacy of Christ. That sounds a little more catchy for pastors, but he thought the book that Reuben's afraid of would be a better title. So, yeah. You know why he's afraid of it? well, first of all, Hebrews is hard. But the second thing is that Spanish, he's unbelievably gifted communicator in Spanish. If you ever come to a conference and hear him translate, it's really, really good. He's a very effective communicator. He's passionate, engaging. His linguistic skills are obviously very good. But what will happen is this is true for any language. Like, for instance, if I took one of you and said, hey, here's an article in Kim's latest journal on pediatric dermatology, my guess is you would stumble on some of the words. Some of you would, at least. And it used to, when Kim was in medical school, I would read articles to her while she was doing stuff because she was like, help me prep for this. So I'm reading it, and I would stumble on about every 20th word, and she'd go, oh, you mean, and she would correct me. And so that's in an English book, textbook, but the language is so specific to medicine that I would mess it up sometimes. And I think that's what's going on with Reuben, is that the book of Hebrews is bad because it has lots of very technical language to it. And so he's nervous about trying to translate. We found out early on in our studies that, like, for instance, the word high priest is not the word high and priest put together in Spanish. Because he would say it, and they would all be like, what are you talking about? And then finally someone would go, oh, no, you mean, and then we'd correct them. And so it turns out, like, there's these technical phrases in the theological world that don't translate colloquially, words we would use. And so then you get the book of Hebrews and you read it in English. It's hard enough in Hebrews. You got high priest, you got all this priestly stuff, you have sacrifices. And I think his concern is that the word will be in English is this, so the Spanish in normal discussion is this, but he doesn't know the translators and everyone else actually chose a really different word over here. And so I think he's nervous about it. So what he's going to do is, I've got the commentary. I gave him the commentary. We bought commentaries for all the pastors in Spanish. So he's going to try to read the entire commentary. He's already started reading the book of Hebrews over and over. So anyway, that's why he's nervous about it. Yes? Yeah, that's why we have the Spanish translation of a commentary, because this is a Spanish theologians translated it. So hopefully Reuben will pick up on the linguistics there. It has. It's more just you got to think too. He's translating just like this, and it's high pace because you guys know I don't talk very fast, but Reuben, I'm kidding. So Reuben talks also really fast, and I talk really fast. And when you combine that two, we get to go in, and it is really the speed of the thing is quite quick. And so then in the middle of that, then trying to think of a technical word you don't normally use, it's hard because it's not as natural vocabulary. So I think that's why it's hard, because we get to go on boom, boom, really, really fast. Sometimes, too, I'll forget he's translating, and I'm preaching, and he'll finally do like this and look at me, and I go, oh, wait, I forgot. And he's like, what did you say? And I have to go back, but yeah, so sometimes, occasionally, I'll catch myself. I'm 3 sentences deep, and Reuben's going, what are you doing here? There's no way I remember all that. But anyway, he's great. We also got out of reading the verses out loud. We have the pastors read them. That helps a lot too, because especially in the book of Hebrews, this will be really helpful. Because Reuben, they use the RVR 1960, which is like the King James Version of Spanish. And the language is really, really difficult. And so Reuben, as great a linguist as he is, he can't read it. It's really hard to read. So we got out of reading it. We just call on a pastor to stand and read it. And for them, it's second nature, because they're all independent Baptists. So the Southern Baptist church plants down there are also liberal, that we don't share theological ideas. But the independent Baptist churches down there, who are King James only, well, RVR 1960 only, they share our theological worldview. So we go down and train. We've talked through this RVR King James only thing before. We've talked through it before. They know where I stand on it, but we're kind about it, and we honor what they like, but they are willing to come and get very in-depth theological training, and then they turn around and preach it. 2/3 of the room every year after we get done teaching through something, they'll preach it either Sunday morning or Sunday night. They use it as their sermon prep, which is exactly what we wanted. We're basically trying to help them do sermon prep because many of them are bivocational. So they're not knuckleheads like me, just like, oh, sit around and read about theology all day. They don't have time to do that. They actually have lives and stuff. They're not like me. They're actually working hard. So I'm trying to help them out because they work so hard at everything they do. It's like if I can help them just a little bit. And I've also probably done a little bit more formal training, just like over at the seminary and hanging out over there a lot. For many of them, they either have very little formal education or they have 1 year Bible college or something like that, which is good. That's like really good. And they have a Bible, which is even better. But sometimes that's hard too, because if you go to seminary, what they make you do is they make you read hard books, and they make you organize theological material a certain way, and they make you work through material in a certain way. They make you learn Greek and Hebrew and stuff like that and translate. That gives you contours to your thinking about material that is helpful. It's not the be-all, end-all. There's people who've never had formal training at all, incredible preachers. So it's not that. But when it comes to like teaching how to preach the book of Hebrews, or we've done Romans, Ephesians, Hebrews, John, Philippians. We've done some I've forgotten. 18 conferences, I think, now. And, we did systematic theology, too, Wayne Grudem's book in Spanish. We taught it over 2 weekends, one in May and went back in July. Taught the entire Wayne Grudem systematic theology. So things like that. But anyway, so it's a lot of fun. The pastors come. They have great questions. It's engaging. We do medical stuff for them, too, while we're there. We do medical clinics. So Kim will go back and do some medical clinics. And so, yeah, that's the plan. Yes, when? That's the plan, yeah. It seems like things have gotten a lot calmer and safer in the last few weeks, so we think this is a perfect time to go back. There's more to that story, by the way, and the more I've read it, I don't think this was we're going down for some medical help. I don't think that's what happened. So it looks more and more like that was a planned meeting and it went south. And I'm not calling those same people to meet me. Just saying. I guess that's true. So usually we cross the border and come right back every day. We don't spend the night. And unless it's just me and Reuben, we used to spend the night in Valle Hermosa. But, or in Constitution, of course, they spend the night there. We've spent several nights there, haven't we, Bill? Yeah. We even brought a person out once. Boy, that was crazy. Anyway, but we just cross during the day and come back, and the goal is to teach 7-8 hours and then come back home or come back across the border. So that's the last week of July. We're going to go. And the Rio Bravos, you pass 7-Elevens between the border crossing and their church, I think. You can go in and get you a Slurpee 7 times before you get to the church, and it's only like a 10-minute drive. So, I love that little town, Rio Bravo, little town. It's like 100,000 people. I love that little town, though. And the food is really good. They have a tamale maker in town, and they have a cake baker in town, this bakery. It's unbelievable. So I love that place. And we first started going to Rio Bravo, too. Mexico was kind of that sleepy town feel to it, and the town squares would have mariachi bands and people selling stuff out on the there's a big courtyard in every Mexican city in town. What's that? The plaza, yeah. And it used to be like, it would be full of people. Well, about 10 years ago, we noticed that like we were going, if things were getting really tense, and then we'd go and there'd be no one out there. Used to be Friday, Saturday nights. It would come alive about 10 p.m. and stay alive till 2 a.m. Families out there with their kids. I mean, like, it was great. But then for about 4 or 5 years, 5, 6 years, nothing. And then right before COVID, the last couple of years we went, you started seeing it come back. Like Rio Bravo downtown, like there was like in the plaza, people out there selling tamales and stuff, and mariachi bands going, and lots of vendors selling things. And so it was a lot of fun, you know. It kind of brought back the sleepy days of Mexico from days gone by. But then COVID happened, and we haven't been back since. So I don't know what we're going to find there in terms of those kinds of things. There for a while, you know, going into Valle Hermoso, there was the Federale, the military was on sandbagged behind machine guns on each side of the road as you came into Valle Hermoso. And then they had machine gun mounted Humvees driving around the city all day. And we stayed in this hotel while we were there, and coming up and down the stairs, we were always meeting Federales with weapons, because the head of the Federales was staying on the third floor of that hotel. So my theory was we're in the safest hotel in town. So I was okay with it. It's like, yeah, we're fine. We're in a safe place here. So I liked it too, because if you go at the hotel, at the end of the street, they have a minor league ballpark in town. And here's why it's cool. There's an evangelical church across the street from it. They own the minor league ballpark. And every game, at the end of the game, when you come out, they have praise and worship and food at their church right across the street. It's awesome. And they sound good. Like, the band is really good. So, yeah, I mean, it's really cool. And so that you come out of the baseball field and you come down, and now I don't know the quality of baseball. I've not seen a game there, but I have seen it after games come out and the crowd's coming out, and then the praise and worship going on. It's a pretty cool deal. Yeah. The church we're at in Valle Hermoso is so far across town that they're not competing for church members or anything like that, because most people walk to church in those areas. And so, but yeah, so it's kind of cool. There's a ballpark there, and it's got like Jesus is Lord in Spanish on the front of the ballpark and stuff. So it's really cool. And I think the night games are hard because I don't think the lighting's great. And the reason I think this is that we had invited Roberto and Tomas. They came up here to come to our church and meet everybody and that kind of thing. I went down there and drove them back to DFW. And we said, hey, let's go to a Rangers game. It's tonight or whatever. And they go, we don't know if we want to go to the game. You can't really see baseball very well at night. I was like, I think we'll be okay. I think it will be fine. I think the lighting will be just fine. So it's the old ballpark, but we come walking in on the third base side, and you know that big opening? You come walking up into the stadium. We walked up there, and Roberto's eyes got big as saucers. He went, whoa. And it turns out whoa in English is whoa in Spanish, so I didn't need a translator. So, but anyway, so they've gone to some of the baseball games at that park. So I think the lighting's not very good, because they were like, well, we don't want to go to a baseball game at night. And then they walked to the ballpark at Arlington like, I think we'll see just fine. Yeah, it's bright as day in here. But anyway, so I miss them. I love them. They're awesome. But I haven't seen them in 3 years. And so it'd be great to get down there. So, yeah, last week of July, we're going to go to Mexico. All right, well, I've rambled enough about all that. We're looking at this text in Revelation chapter 11, and really just the first few verses. Then there was given to me a measuring rod like a staff, and someone said, get up and measure the temple of God and the altar and those who worship in it. So I don't know if it's a height check on people worshiping. Like, dude, you have got to, you're not tall enough. I don't know what we're going to do here. No, but measuring, I assume, means counting, giving an account of. And then it says, leave out the court, which is outside the temple, and do not measure it, for it has been given to the nations. And they will tread underfoot the holy city for 42 months. So this is a very interesting text. And from there, we move into the two witnesses. But we're not going to do the two witnesses today because I have too much material to combine the two witnesses. So I'm just going to skip now to our text, some of the study notes for today. All right, so first thing, we have this measuring rod, and last week I intended to put the picture of one in. I found a picture of an ancient measuring rod. or reed. This thing's about 3 to 4 feet long, something like that. This is Egyptian, so it's got hieroglyphics on it. But I think as often happened with Egyptian tools, they wind up everywhere else really quickly. You know that pottery always began in Egypt and would spread to the world. This is how you date as you dig at tells, dig sites. This is how you date the layer you're in, is pottery. Pottery is like fashions for 20th century, 21st century. Like you're digging and you find pottery that's dressed in bell bottoms of orange or brown colors, you know it was from 1970. Like immediately. So that's the way it is with pottery. You know what I'm saying? Like if you have Izod shirts, you go, ooh, that's 1982. If the pottery has Izod's little alligator on it, you're like, oh, bro, that's 1982 pottery. So that's how you know is that this pottery changes over time. And the Egyptians and the Greeks were the big players in this. They would drive the kind of culture. They were like Paris and New York on fashion when new fashions come out, right? And so what will happen is that you see something like this in Egypt and you go, man, that's a great idea. And so Egyptians were really good at this. They were real into building, as you know. And it was a pyramid scheme. But yeah, so they were really into building. And so these kinds of measuring rods. So this is handed to John. And so this is like construction stuff, and he's supposed to use it now. And he's given instructions on what to use. Oh, so this is a small, lightweight, hollow reed that was straight as a stick and was often used for measuring the length of things. That's a quote out of Osborne. I'll just give you the quote because I thought it was helpful. And I had a picture. So I had a picture and a quote. That's good. That's good. They tell you every 8 minutes you got to do something else because people will stop paying attention. So I've now given you a picture and a quote. All right? Just saying. What's that? Yeah. And I'm talking slow, so it's okay. All right, so we have this measuring rod, and he's supposed to measure. Now, it's interesting, the breakdown of the temple. This sounds very much like the temple of Herod, the temple of Jesus' day, because the court of the Gentiles is involved here. Solomon, when he builds his original temple, he's not building it going, you know what we need? We need a court of the Gentiles. When Herod built, he didn't completely build it. Obviously, Ezra and Nehemiah had built, they had something then. But he like massively expands the whole complex. And they included this court of the Gentiles. That way people could visit. They could visit but not go all the way in. Yeah, they could visit but not go all the way in. There's places like that today. We've been to the Taj Mahal. And at the Taj Mahal, it's a burial site. It's a Muslim burial site, too, which is weird because it's in a town that's dominated by Hinduism. But it's a Muslim burial site. But because of that, you can't wear shoes into the Muslim burial site. So what you got to do is you have to take your shoes off. Well, it's 120 degrees in Agra, India. And that white marble, it will burn your feet off. So what they do with Americans who are soft like me is they put socks over your shoes. You can buy them for 50 rupees. So for $1, and they put the socks over your shoes. So now you can keep your shoes on and you have these little blue socks and you go in with those on. That way you don't burn your feet. Okay? But there's only certain places you can go in the Taj Mahal. Other places are restricted, right? And so it's like a tourist thing. It's like the Taj Mahal is today. Is kind of like that. I've been a couple of times to the Taj, and it's a really beautiful building. It is. It's stunning. It's really amazing. But there are restrictions to it. And I think the Temple of Israel is like that too. Like, it's a stunning building. You should come check it out. I think they wanted it not as much for tourism, though I wouldn't put it past the Sadducees thinking about it as a tourist site. But primarily because they were looking for people who had converted from Gentile world into Judaism, that they would have a religious experience place as well. So I think that was built into some of this. So he's supposed to measure it, and we have this whole thing separated out. And he's supposed to measure the temple of God, the altar, and those who worship in it, but not the courtyard outside, which was the courtyard of the Gentiles. And he's told because it has been given to the nations, and they will trample the holy city for 42 months. All right, so This is not the only time in the Bible where people are measuring the temple. So I'll give you a couple of examples and the tie directly to both Ezekiel and Zechariah. So Ezekiel chapter 40. Pages are crisp in this section of the Bible. Yeah. No dog ears on those pages, darn it. Those are clean pages. Yeah. It's hard reading. I told you guys, I tried to read the entire Bible in 30 days. It took me 45. But that meant reading the entire book of Isaiah in a day, reading the entire book of Ezekiel in a day, the entire book of Jeremiah in a day, that kind of thing. And I will tell you, Isaiah was fine. 66 chapters of Isaiah, it was okay. That was okay. You know Isaiah's got 66 chapters, right? And you know it's broken into the first 39 and the last 27. Isn't that crazy? Just like the Bible is. And the first 39 are very Old Testament, and the next 27 are very New Testament feel to it. I mean, like, it's pretty amazing stuff. But anyway, so I don't know that Isaiah was doing that. Isaiah didn't go, I'll make 66 chapters, especially since they didn't add chapters till like 800 years after he was dead. But yeah.
As far as Isaiah goes, are the chapters pretty much laid out how they feel it was
Wrote it originally? Yes, probably. Jeremiah's is more questionable because remember he gets it, the king Jehoiakim burns it. Yeah, he burns it in the worst way. Jeremiah would read it to him and he'd take, or Barak, I think his assistant, would read it to him and he'd take the page and he'd put it in his winter fireplace to warm himself. So, yeah, Jehoiakim's a bad dude. So Jeremiah had to reconstruct the entire thing. So Jeremiah's, I think, that's why sometimes I think feels oddly out of order at times in Jeremiah, because like he goes backward and forward in time. Isaiah does feel very chronological. So does Ezekiel. They feel very chronological. And so I think Isaiah is pretty tightly chronicled. Now, there's people who believe in Deutero-Isaiah authorship because the second half of the book feels so different. And I had always heard that, but you read it in one day, it will smack you around. It's so dramatic. Like you'll go, whoa, that is totally different. I think what happened is after Hezekiah went, oh, so my kids are going to be, or my grandkids are the ones that are going to get run over by the Babylonians? What do I care? I think Isaiah just took his pen and went, oh, never mind. I think he's like, I'm not writing anymore. These guys are all idiots. and then I think, a decade later, God's like, no, get the pen again. So it would feel different. I've read writings I wrote for seminary 20 years ago and went, who wrote this? I don't recognize this, So you change over time. Life changes, you change. You become less dogmatic about some things, more dogmatic about others. You become more hopeful about some things and less hopeful about others. So life has a way of resetting your thinking on things. Like, for instance, before I had kids, I knew exactly how to parent. I was a perfect parent. And then I got kids and went, this is hard. And then the kids got older, and I say, I'm terrible at this. I have no idea what I'm doing. And so time has a way of resetting you, So in the Isaiah thing, that's what's going on. Ezekiel, though, does feel very chronological in its approach. Like Isaiah and Jeremiah have early on calling. Ezekiel chapter 1 is a very odd calling, though. Remember, you got the wills within wills, and he sees this vision of God. It feels a little bit like Revelation 4 and 5, but it's just odd language, that kind of thing. But we get to the end, we have this, Ezekiel's going to start talking about this temple, okay? It says, in the 25th year of our exile, at the beginning of the year, on the 10th of the month, in the 14th year after the city was taken, on this very day, the hand of the Lord was upon me, and he brought me there. In the visions of God, he brought me into the land of Israel and set me on a very high mountain. And on it, to the south, there was something like a structure of a city. And remember, at the point of Ezekiel, Jerusalem's been cleared, and it's the place where jackals live and eagles nest. That's it. There's nothing there. The Kidron Valley is still filled with all the garbage that was thrown in it from that time period. So he brought me there, and behold, there was a man whose appearance was like the appearance of bronze, with the thread of flocks and measuring rod in his hand. And he was standing in the doorway and said to me, Son of man, see with your eyes, hear with your ears, and pay attention to all that I'm going to show you, for they've been brought here in order to show it to you. Declare to the house of Israel all that you see. And behold, there was a wall on the outside of the temple all around. And in the man's hand was a measuring rod of 6 cubits, each of which was a cubit and a hand width. So he measured the thickness of the wall, 1 rod, and the height, 1 rod. Then I raised my eyes and looked, and behind there was a man with a measuring line in his hand. And I said, "Where are you going?" And he said to me, "To measure Jerusalem, to see how wide and how long it is." All right, so by the way, that's Zechariah. I move forward. Ezekiel's measurement, by the way, has generated a lot of interest because people have tried to figure out what this temple would measure in actual size. And unless we're misunderstanding the measurements, or he's describing something way bigger than anything that's ever been built in Jerusalem. So there's been a debate about this. Like, is this some futuristic? Remember in the book of Revelation, like a new heaven and new earth come down, and there's a new temple, but the description of all of it is like massive, and all the world streaming to it, that kind of thing. Some people have thought, well, Ezekiel's seeing that heavenly city, that heavenly temple. That's a possibility. Some people think he's seeing the rebuilt temple, but his measurements, if we understand them correctly, are massive. Like, these are huge. The walls are huge. The structure is huge. I didn't give you all the details here, but like they start measuring, you give out all the measurements, they're massive. And so some people were like, "Ooh, that doesn't sound like Herod the Great's temple. That doesn't sound like the temple during the time of Christ, and it's certainly not Solomon's temple. It sounds too big." And the reason it's significant is that if it's the heavenly temple, then what is it that, John is measuring not the heavenly temple clearly because the Gentiles are trampling under feet for a period of 42 months. So there's that. All right. Zechariah also has a temple measuring. It says, "Then I raised my eyes." Zechariah, by the way, is the most apocalyptic book of the Old Testament. It is hard reading. Back to my experiment of trying to read through the Bible in a month. It's hard reading, and there's lots of imagery in it. It's the most like the book of Revelation in some ways. Like, there's lots of imagery, and if you don't understand the imagery, it'll bog you down. You're like, what is he talking about? I'm not sure I understand. So lots of imagery. So Ezekiel and Zechariah, book of Daniel, these are books that John draws from in the book of Revelation, or that God continues the theme of in the book of Revelation. So here we have, "Then I raised and looked, and behold, there was a man with a measuring line in his hand. So I said, 'Where are you going?' He said to me, 'To measure Jerusalem, to see how wide it is and how long it is.' And behold, the angel who had been speaking with me was going out, and another angel was going out to meet him. And he said to him, 'Run, speak to the young man there, saying, Jerusalem will be inhabited as open country because of the multitude of the people and cattle within it. But I, declares the Lord, will be a wall of fire to her on all sides, and I will be the glory in her midst.'" So there's this Zechariah thing, and again, kind of a reference to measuring. And is this a heavenly temple? Because again, you have this reference to, "I will be her glory in her midst." Remember that in the book of Revelation, we're told, no need for the sun, because the glory of God will shine, and he will be in their midst. God will dwell with his people. They will dwell with him. So this all has futuristic type language. I think that's what's going on here. Now, so back to Revelation 21, this is a very similar statement to what we saw in Ezekiel and especially in Zechariah. It says, "The one who spoke with me had a golden measuring rod to measure the city, its gates and its walls. The city is laid out as a square, and its length is as great as its width. And he measured the city with a rod, 12,000 stadia. Its length, width, and height are equal. And he measured its wall 144 cubits by human measurements, which are also angelic measurements." So it turns out the British system and the metric system have been rejected by both God, or by angels and, I guess, John. I don't know, or biblical times. So no centimeters there, darn it. Yeah. So this is, again, the measurement of this city is so big that some people have speculated that the new heaven and the new earth may not be the same size it currently is. Because I think this measurement, I heard someone say this is like 25% of the Earth's land mass, just for the city. So anyway, this is a massive city, this is a massive structure, and which I think is kind of the idea, right? Okay. So in Osborne, he says this, which I love Osborne's commentary. It's been very insightful and very helpful. I've learned so much. You guys know I'm a Book of Revelation novice. Despite going to DTS and taking the Book of Revelation from Dr. Zuck, of all people, the author of the Bible Knowledge Commentary with Dr. Walvoord. I mean, like legendary over there. But I had him, and that was, well, it wasn't the whole course just on Revelation. There were a couple other books in there too. But so I had like the expert in this. I walked away from that class going, I'm not sure I understand this book at all. So then I spent the last 30 years avoiding it. Because that's what every mature, theologically minded pastor should do. Is if it's hard, run the other direction, right? And then you guys forced my hand because you're like, what do we want to study? And you're like, let's do the book of Revelation. And the next thing you know, I didn't feel like I could say to you, we're not doing that because it's too hard. That doesn't sound good. And that makes the preacher look like a moron. So I was like, okay, we'll do it. But in my heart, I was going, this is a terrible idea because I don't know anything about this book. I mean, I've read it several times and I've heard sermons from it and I've preached from it some. But like teaching it line by line, verse by verse, all the way through, it's my first attempt at this. So just so you know. Some of you are like, well, I wish I had known that before we joined this club. Rethink that. Anyway. By the way, there's a few other books in the Bible that are also true, just not in the New Testament. But there's a few other books in the Bible that I could also say this about. So I've not taught line by line, say, for instance, the book of Ezekiel, that kind of thing. I'm working through Jeremiah, though, on Wednesday nights right now, and that's good.
Are there some commentaries on any significance about measuring rods? Because I guess I probably have read Ezekiel and Zechariah. Totally forgotten about how analogous that is to Revelation. So I guess in Jewish culture or something, is there something, there's an extra spiritual...
Why bring up this measuring stuff? That's a good question. Now, you do remember in the building of the tabernacle, I should have mentioned this. Thanks for telling me. So Moses goes up on Mount Sinai, right? And God, while he's up there, God says, hey, build the tabernacle this far and no further, this high, no higher, this wide, no wider. Put this gold on it, put the rings, this, like there's 3 chapters of architectural drawings in words. Then, in shocking fashion, Moses comes down, they start building the thing, and he says, we built the tabernacle this far, no further, this high, no higher. You're like, we get 3 more chapters of all those specifications, and we're told they did it that way. And you would have thought Moses could have saved 3 chapters by saying, all of the specifications we followed to the letter, like 1 verse, and move on. But instead we get 3 more chapters. It does at least give a hint. I've heard a few theologians say the following, that this is to think through the very specific ways in which God wants the tabernacle built, the temple built, worship to occur, that he has these very specific, he's not leaving it up to the imagination of the human. Because when that happens, we get idolatry and we get all kinds of other stuff. So I do wonder whether all of this is just speaking to the fact that this is God-driven, very specific. He's not guessing. This is not thrown together. This is not casual, but very specific, purposeful type directions. And that we're not left to the individual to dream up, hey, I kind of like the temple to be more like this, and those kinds of things. That God is driving this at very specific levels, at every level. And so you get it back in the tabernacle in the book of Exodus, so I'm glad you mentioned that, Paul, because I forgot to mention that. And then you get these specific measurements in Zechariah and Ezekiel, and then you get to the book of Revelation, and again, we get the measuring rod. Those very specific, and we get these dimensions. And so all of these things, I think, speak to the specificity. Boy, I hate that word, specificity. Did I get that right? Okay. That word's trouble. All right, so specifically, I'm going to avoid it. Okay, so I think that's kind of like God kind of saying, I'm not looking for you to dream this up. I have a plan. We're going to do this, and it's going to be purposeful. That's why he didn't leave it up to Moses, like, I want you to build me a tabernacle. make it kind of nice, I'd like it to be nice. If I'm going to hang out there, I'd kind of like you guys to come up with some ideas that God doesn't do that with them. And we see from Aaron's response in the golden calf that it's probably the reason why he doesn't leave it into their hands, because we see what happens when they're left to their own devices. And it's ironic that he gets all this, architectural design, and we get Aaron's golden calf kind of paralleling each other. Like what happens when humans think of it? Like, a golden calf and lots of immorality and drinking. And God thinks it of like very specific, the orientations around the covenant between God and man, God's presence with his people, the holiness of God, the reverence of God, the need for sacrifice, the need for sin sacrifice, all those kinds of things. We get all those specifications. So God's like, here's what you guys need. You need a covenant with me. You need my presence. You need a sense of holiness and reverence about me, but you need a place for sin offerings. You need a place to come and gather and worship in community. You need a place for wisdom. Remember that this is where you go to get answers, all that kind of stuff. And so he doesn't leave it to their own devices, because you get a pagan-oriented world, it's like it's a place for drinking, sexuality, and lots of open grilled meat. Yeah, it sounds like a NFL tailgate party. But anyway, so that's what happens when you leave it to human devices. So that may be what's going on here is some of this is just God's not leaving it to Israel like Israel going, hey, when we get back to Jerusalem, I got an idea about how we should redo our religious life. He tells Ezekiel, they're about 25 years into this period now. They're going to go back, but Ezekiel's going to die, so he's not going to be there when they go back. And so Ezekiel's like, this is what God said to do with building this thing, these dimensions. So when they get back to Jerusalem, they don't go, well, with the Babylonians, I like some of their worship. That, the Zoroastrianism stuff, maybe we can incorporate that. No. We're going to go back to these dimensions. And so I think some of that may be too antithetical to the culture around them, maybe. So, I don't know. I'm guessing on that. But Osborne says this, in Ezekiel 40 to 42, the measuring of the temple signifies God's ownership and protection of his people. God is present with his people, and they belong to him. Also, Zechariah 2, 1 to 5, a man with a measuring line goes out to measure Jerusalem in order to indicate God's protection of the holy city. Therefore, he will restore the temple to his people. And then, like I said, I think also in addition to that, God doesn't want to leave it to their own devices. He doesn't want to leave it to their imagination about how they should worship or what religion should look like when they get back to Jerusalem. All right. We'll start then. The next thing we'll talk about next week is this idea of the Gentiles, the trampling of the city for 42 months, which we've already discussed that a little bit, the 42 months. But we'll talk about that a little bit. We'll tie it to the book of Daniel and spend a little bit of time on that. But it's going to be trampled underfoot for 42 months or 3.5 years or 1,260 days. Just in case you were questioning which it is, 42 months, 3.5 years, or 1,260 days. You talk about being specific, like that's pretty specific. So, all right. So we'll talk through that next week when we reconvene this conversation. All right. You guys are awesome. Let's close with a word of prayer. Lord, thank you for your scripture. Help us, Lord, as we work through all of the scripture, especially the book of Revelation. God, we confess it's challenging and difficult, and we need your help. We also want to apply these truths in a way that is transformative, that we live changed lives. Thank you so much for your grace, your presence, your love for us. Thank you for your promises that involve eternal life and the gathering of the saints with you forever. Pray all these things in the name of Christ Jesus. Amen. All right, you guys are